Welcome to Podkey Left and Right, where today the evidence matters as much as the headlines. A leaked Fauci diary, sealed grand jury conflicts, shaky forensic science, party cash problems, and AI economics all point at the same question. When institutions ask for trust, what are they actually showing and what are they still hiding? The Fauci material has two layers that need separating. First, the diary entries reportedly show a huge amount of attention to press coverage, including hundreds of entries tagged to media and even self-congratulatory language about being the most famous person in the country. That doesn't prove policy corruption by itself, but it does matter because media incentives can shape how a public official frames uncertainty and disagreement. Second, the entries are said to conflict with later public messaging on school closures, early fatality estimates, and the Wuhan market theory. If those entries are authentic and accurately characterized, the strongest criticism is not that Fauci was uniquely evil, it's that he may have projected more certainty in public than he had in private, which is a classic trust killer in a crisis. Then there's the pardon question. A sweeping, preemptive federal pardon protects against federal prosecution for covered past conduct, but it doesn't magically settle every Fifth Amendment issue people are arguing about on TV. The key legal dispute is whether immunity from prosecution removes a realistic risk of self-incrimination on the same topics. Some analysts say yes, which would weaken a blanket fifth claim on pardoned conduct. Others point out exposure can still exist through state law, perjury, contempt, or questions outside the pardon's scope. So the simple slogan that a pardon automatically means you must answer every question is overstated. What does hold up better is the political optic. A broad pardon plus repeated fifth invocations invites the public to assume there is something serious to hide, even if the legal reality is narrower and messier. The deeper pandemic argument isn't only about Fauci, it's about how institutions handle dissent. Critics say liability shields, mandate pressure, and retaliation against dissenting clinicians made open debate harder. Supporters of those measures would answer that emergency conditions required speed, standardization, and protection for vaccine deployment. Both incentives were real. The stronger claim is not that every dissenter was right, plenty weren't. The stronger claim is that a healthy system needs visible room for challenge, especially when evidence is moving fast. The reported media scientist closeness matters here too. Dinners, flattering segments, and the America's Doctor branding may not prove a coordinated cover-up, but they do suggest a feedback loop where journalism became access management and status reinforcement. Once the public sees that, every later correction looks less like science updating itself and more like insiders protecting insiders. That's a major second-order cost, and you can draw a pretty direct line from that to today's distrust. The youth mental health numbers are the part that should stop everyone cold. If school shutdowns and broader pandemic restrictions coincided with large increases in suicide attempts, eating disorders, depression, and anxiety, then any honest retrospective has to weigh those harms alongside infection control, not treat them as a footnote. The von Bülow retrial is a reminder that forensic evidence can look mathematically precise while being scientifically fragile. The prosecution's insulin number was treated like a hard anchor, but defense testing reportedly showed the same sample producing wildly inconsistent readings, plus false positives in controls that should not have registered insulin at all. If that's right, then the lab result wasn't a solid pillar, it was a shaky instrument being asked to carry the whole case. The needle residue fight points the same way. Prosecutors said tip residue suggested injection. Defense experts argued true injection patterns would leave residue differently, and that tip-only residue fit a staged scenario better. That doesn't prove innocence on its own, but it absolutely shows why juries can be misled by physical evidence that sounds more exact than it is. Chain of custody gaps make everything worse. Missing notes, delayed retrieval, no fingerprints, no photographs, outside access to key containers. Once evidence handling gets sloppy, even honest findings become hard to trust because contamination and tampering become impossible to rule out cleanly. That same logic shows up in newer controversies, whether it's disputed autopsies, missing footage, or enhanced audio that independent analysts say is still basically unintelligible. The lesson is broader than any one defendant. Low-quality evidence doesn't become high quality because an institution labels it expert. The John Benet material and the Idaho case both show the promise and limits of modern DNA narratives. In John Benet's case, the big confirmed fact is the tension between a grand jury willing to indict and a prosecutor unwilling to proceed because the proof apparently didn't clear a beyond reasonable doubt threshold. Those are not the same standard, and the secrecy around that conflict distorted public understanding for years. Unknown male DNA in multiple clothing locations sounds powerful, and it is important, but touch DNA is not a magic answer key. It can identify, exclude, or complicate depending on mixture quality, transfer, and database hits. That's why genetic genealogy is attractive, but not guaranteed to resolve anything quickly. The Idaho plea withdrawal fight turns on similar distinctions. Claims about withheld exculpatory evidence, unknown DNA, and an implausibly compressed timeline deserve scrutiny. But at this stage, they're allegations in a motion, not established findings. What is fair to say is that a guilty plea without much public factual airing leaves a vacuum, and vacuums get filled by theory. Online communities make that worse. Discord confessions, influencer bounties, manipulated clips, and crowdsourced certainty can contaminate witnesses, create harassment campaigns, and muddy real investigations. Sometimes the internet surfaces leads. Very often, it just multiplies noise. The DNC story is less ideological than operational. Debt, a loan against headquarters, weaker cash than the RNC, and even a basic impersonation scam all suggest an organization with both resource stress and control problems. The calendar fight matters because early states don't just vote first, they shape who looks viable. Moving South Carolina to the front can reward candidates with establishment ties and stronger support among older, more moderate Democrats. That's not inherently illegitimate, but it is a strategic choice dressed up as process reform. At the same time, debates over the DSA, candidate vetting, and grassroots versus ad spending all come back to party identity. Do you build a broad coalition with year-round local organizing or a sharper ideological brand with activist energy? Parties usually want both. They rarely get both. Polling on Trump cuts the other way. If the cited numbers are right, the story isn't just low approval, it's coalition strain inside the GOP, where core loyalists remain loyal but softer. Republicans and independents have moved away. Public support for voter ID, meanwhile, shows how often elite messaging diverges from mass opinion on specific issues. The AI segment is where today's habit of overclaiming might be strongest. There's a plausible case that many AI firms are running loss leader economics, chasing market capture and investor belief more than durable unit profits. That doesn't mean the technology is fake, it means the business story may be less mature than the public story. The better supported concerns are concrete. Labor substitution, algorithmic wage discrimination, concentrated market power, privacy lag, environmental strain, and local backlash against data centers. Those are real policy questions right now, and they don't require apocalyptic robot fantasies to be serious. The weaker frame is treating AI as either civilization-ending doom or automatic prosperity. Usually when a sector gets narrated in those extremes, somebody is trying to raise money, avoid regulation, or both. That's it for Podkey Left and Right. The through line today was simple. Evidence can be strong, weak, hidden, or oversold, and those are very different things. See you next time. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.